Fairview, a town where nothing ever happened until it did. Nestled in the heart of the countryside, Fairview was the epitome of tranquility. Its streets were lined with charming houses, each with well-manicured lawns and white picket fences. The townsfolk knew each other by name, and the biggest news was often about the annual fair or a new bakery opening. But all that changed one fateful night. Sarah Lawson, a beloved florist, found dead behind her shop. Sarah was more than just a florist. She was a beacon of joy in Fairview. Her shop, Petals and Blooms, was a haven of color and fragrance, where townspeople would gather not just to buy flowers, but to chat and share stories. Her sudden death sent shockwaves through the community. Her face pale, neck bruised, eyes wide with terror. The sight was haunting, a stark contrast to the vibrant life she once led. The brutality of the crime left everyone in disbelief. How could such a heinous act occur in their peaceful town? Killed in the dead of night, left to be discovered, but not too soon. The darkness of the night seemed to swallow the town whole, casting long shadows and an eerie silence. It was as if the very soul of Fairview had been tainted. Enter Detective Daniel Harris, arriving just before dawn. Detective Harris was known for his sharp mind and relentless pursuit of justice. He had solved numerous cases in the city, but this small-town murder presented a different kind of challenge. He'd seen gruesome murders, but this one, different. There was something deeply unsettling about the scene. The meticulousness of the crime, the lack of evidence, it all pointed to a killer who was both cunning and cold-hearted. No forced entry, no struggle, no clear motive. The killer, precise, purposeful. It was as if the murderer had planned every detail, leaving no room for error. The lack of struggle suggested that Sarah might have known her attacker, adding another layer of complexity to the case. Forensics found one clue, a small silver ring near Sarah's body. The ring was an enigma. It didn't belong to Sarah, and its presence raised more questions than answers. Who did it belong to? And why was it left behind? Not hers. Worn and old, dropped in haste. The ring's age and wear suggested it had a history, perhaps a story that could lead them to the killer. It was a small but significant piece of the puzzle. Daniel pocketed it, feeling its weight. The ring felt heavy, not just in a physical sense, but with the weight of the mystery it carried. It was a tangible link to the murderer, a clue that could unravel the entire case. Maybe, just maybe, the key to solving the case. Daniel's determination grew. He knew that every detail, no matter how small, could be crucial. The ring was his first real lead, and he was determined to follow it to the end. Sarah, well-liked, with no known enemies. Her death was a mystery. Everyone loved Sarah. She was kind, generous, and always willing to lend a helping hand. The idea that someone would want to harm her was unfathomable. But Daniel knew better. There's always a shadow lurking. In his experience, even the most idyllic places had their dark corners. He was determined to uncover the secrets that Fairview was hiding. Her phone records, late-night calls with Greg Simmons, a quiet warehouse worker. The phone records were revealing. Greg Simmons, a seemingly unremarkable man, had been in frequent contact with Sarah. What were they discussing in those late-night calls? Greg admitted they were dating, planning to move in together, swearing he hadn't seen her that night. Greg's confession added a new dimension to the case. Their relationship was a secret, and now he was the prime suspect. But was he telling the truth? His grief seemed genuine, but his nerves, suspicious. Greg's behavior was erratic. He was visibly shaken, but there was something off about his demeanor. Was it just grief, or was he hiding something? And then the twist. Greg had a missing ex-wife, disappeared 5 years ago, case gone cold. The revelation was shocking. Greg's past was more complicated than anyone had realized. His ex-wife's disappearance had never been solved, and now it seemed eerily similar to Sarah's case, parallels too strong to ignore. The similarities between the two cases were striking. Both women had vanished without a trace, and now Sarah was dead. Was Greg responsible for both? The ring was Greg's ex-wife's. The discovery was a breakthrough. The ring, once a symbol of love, was now a damning piece of evidence. It connected Greg to both women, and possibly to both crimes. Described in detail by her family, simple silver. The family's description matched the ring perfectly. It was a chilling confirmation that Greg was more involved than he had let on. Greg was seen wearing it last. Witnesses confirmed that Greg had been seen wearing the ring. It was another piece of the puzzle, further implicating him in the crime. Daniel, now watching Greg closely, uncovered more secrets. The more Daniel dug, the more he found. Greg's life was a web of lies and deceit, and Daniel was determined to untangle it. Greg had a violent past hidden by bribes and connections. Greg's history was darker than anyone had imagined. He had a record of violence, but had managed to keep it hidden through bribes and connections. Forensics matched his prints to the ring. The forensic evidence was irrefutable. Greg's fingerprints were on the ring, placing him at the scene of the crime. He was at the scene. The evidence was mounting. Greg had been at the scene, and now it was up to Daniel to prove his guilt. Brought in again, Greg faced relentless questioning. The interrogation was intense. Daniel and his team pressed Greg for answers, determined to break him. Facts laid bare. Connections, the ring, no alibi. The pressure, intense. The evidence was overwhelming. Greg had no alibi, and the connections were too strong to ignore. The pressure was mounting, and it was only a matter of time before he cracked. Hours passed, and Greg cracked. The hours dragged on, but finally Greg broke. The weight of his lies and the relentless questioning were too much for him to bear. "She found out about me," he whispered. "About my ex." Greg's confession was chilling. He had been living a double life, and Sarah had discovered his dark secret. "I didn't mean to kill her." His voice was filled with regret, but it was too late. The damage was done, and there was no going back. I didn't want her to leave," he confessed, controlling, possessive, panicked. Greg's confession painted a picture of a man who couldn't stand to lose control. His possessiveness had driven him to commit the unthinkable. Followed Sarah, tried to convince her. Rejected, he snapped. The reenactment showed the tragic sequence of events. Greg had followed Sarah, desperate to convince her to stay. But when she rejected him, he lost control, strangled her just like his ex-wife. The brutality of the act was shocking. Greg had repeated his past crime, unable to escape his violent tendencies. The ring, his fatal mistake. The ring, once a symbol of love, had become his undoing. It was the key piece of evidence that had led to his downfall. Greg led away in handcuffs. Justice served, but hollow. The sight of Greg being led away in handcuffs brought a sense of closure, but it was bittersweet. 2 lives had been lost, and the town of Fairview would never be the same. 2 lives lost to a man who couldn't stand to lose control. The memorials were a stark reminder of the tragedy. Sarah and Greg's ex-wife had both fallen victim to his uncontrollable rage. Fairview, forever scarred by the midnight stalker. The town of Fairview would never forget the events that had unfolded. The midnight stalker had left an indelible mark, and the once peaceful town would always carry the scars of that fateful night.
Make sure to subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon, and like the video.